Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Deadly Spark, and welcome to my Let's Build world. Uh, this is sort of a part two in spirit to my space battleship Yamato projects in Minecraft, which is one of my oldest videos on the channel and also one of my most popular. And boy, how far have we come from that? Um, I feel like we should begin in some ways where we left off with the Andromeda class ship and the EDF battleship, which is sort of interesting. I'll probably play some intercut footage. I'll probably have to reduce my render distance now, uh, just so it's more tolerable. Um, I'll probably have some like intercut footage of like the old, with the new, but this is sort of interesting because I built this based on a model that I own of the old Andromeda, from the original series. I think I started building this before I knew about 2202, um, and finished building it after I knew about it, and then that's where these sort of came along, these two ships on either side. That's why they're sort of built to the style of the old ships, as these aren't angled and there's a bunch of various other details, but they're still more old school design. Um, but I mean, the design compared to the original is so much more improved. Um, that's what we got. This is the first ship I built on this world. Um, this is, yeah, the first ship I built on this world, and then I did the old copy paste with these ships. I was planning on, see how these are flanking either side. I was planning on doing the same thing even higher with carriers and rebuilding the top and back, but there was no height limit for that. That is still something I might do in the future with the increased height limit, but is not something I have committed to doing just yet. But then we got this old faithful, the uh, the old thumbnail of the old video. This ship right here, except a updated one built with concrete instead of wool, and made in the same sort of styling as that I use for that, and it came out, I mean, identical, because it is identical. But the ship over here is a remake to be in the style of the 202 ship. You can see the superstructure's different. There's the extra designs. This comes out a bit further and is slightly different design. I think this might come out a little bit further too. Um, where there's a whole lot of extra work that went into just fixing up this one to be a little bit different. And we did the old copy paste to get the Mars variant, the Mars defense variant, and I think that's the, I forget exactly which one this is. It's either Moon or like Earth, like right at the Earth, but I can't actually remember the exact name of this one. I'm sure I'll be corrected if enough people see this. Um, the colors of these ships, it's sort of awkward because this is not the color I want, but this doesn't look right for the comparing ship. Where this looks more right for this one, that's why I used it. But that they're both not quite right for what I was looking for, and I don't think they've added any blocks that could take that spot since. So it's just been lingering, something that's just bugs me just that little bit because it's a bright blue instead of a more navy. When that's not quite even navy, it's like, yeah, it's a bit awkward. But I think that's it for our tour of the Andromeda class ships and the dreadnought slash battleship. Um, we shall move, I think, because it's right here, to the latest of my builds, the space battleship Yamato itself. The 2199 variant, because that's the one I was using. Though the front probably looks a little bit 2202-ish. The it's I didn't quite get the angle right, but it worked and was easy to make. It was much easier to make it work with the angles and stuff a bit shorter. So it doesn't quite match 100% there. Um, but I mean, we're trying to work with these angles. It's pretty difficult. But with how this turned out, when I finished it, it was like I didn't even build it. I backed away and I'm like, I really, I had to like pinch myself that I actually built it because it's like it's the best thing I've ever built. Um, it was extremely frustrating at times. The third bridge, absolute pain in the ass. Even though it's quite small and simple in hindsight compared to the rest of the ship, it was frustrating. The back for some reason was infinitely more stressful than the front. Um, just trying to get it to sort of fit the shape of this round shape from a awkward sort of oval was a bit sort of funky. Um, the rest wasn't too bad. Like adding the extra details, this was nice, and this turned out. I'm really happy with how this turned out. It looks pretty good from back here. Um, but the real bit that I'm most proud of, I mean, that they turned out pretty good too. The catapults, but it's just this whole section. Uh, the superstructure just ended up coming out so good. I mean, it's not perfect, but I mean, you're dealing with blocks here. Um, but even before the superstructure, when I had just this down, like obviously I wish I could color match, but these turned out exceptionally good. And this whole section here with the weighties, I mean, if I could have half slabs of that, it would be fantastic as well, because then I wouldn't need to do this. But in some ways, it kind of adds its own character and detail to it. Um, but just like the missile silos for the smokestack and all the different AA guns all around the ship, and then like the superstructure itself and trying to get it all fitting. It was a rewarding experience once I'd completed it, but I can tell you that it was immensely frustrating to do a few of these parts over and over again until I got it right. Um, the most frustrating is mirroring work that you hate, which was doing this, which wasn't too bad, working it out, but then just having to copy it on the other side and try and make sure it was all right was infinitely frustrating. Uh, but that's just how it is sometimes. You know, you have to persevere, and then you just get absolute brilliant, uh, brilliant finishes like this. And I'm extremely proud of this right here. Um, but moving on from this, we have the Kirishima, if I remember correctly. One of the very first ships you're introduced to, because I think it's in the first opening shot as the lead ship. Um, it's the flagship for the first fleet, I think it is. Um, that are out. This was before they had the wave motion technology. This was Captain Okuta's ship, and it was the command vessel on the day. And yeah, this one I remember. This was like the first sort of foray into difficult sort of shaping, and with all the work I've done on that, I reckon I could potentially do a better job now. But this was a bit awkward because it wasn't just a straight expanding sort of circular shape. This bit was a bit raised as compared to this, and that's why it's like that here. And it was a little bit awkward. Um, the bottom was less so; it had less of that shape, so it was a bit easier. But this was my first sort of dip into this sort of structure, which was quite difficult because I didn't really do that with the Andromeda. The Andromeda and the other ships were quite simple in comparison, but that wasn't. I mean, this just turned out great. This was like one of the easier bits, but behind this was probably the hardest part of this build was making this round shape. Um, that sort of curved up into this out what like sort of out curving wall section. So that we had to get this matching with that, and it just didn't. It was quite difficult. And then the end sort of worked out. This was also a little awkward, but not the worst. Um, the a few things had a few revisions, like we added a bit of thickness to this after, especially after we did the bottom one, which turned out so good. This is probably the cleanest part. It looks almost identical to how I wanted to get it done. Um, but the ship ended up being a tad bit stubby. It's probably a little bit shorter than the the actual ship would be. But overall, I was really happy with it because it was the hardest ship I had built to date. Because I mean, the Andromeda was difficult in its own right, but it had a lot more straight lines than this. And then we move on to this, which was much easier than that. It took much less time, uh, but still had its own revisions, like this underneath bit. I think needed to be shortened a little bit, but this is how am I forgetting? The Yukikaze. That's right. This is the Yukikaze. This is Alec. I almost said the wrong name. This is Mamoru Kodai's ship. I think I even put down the 177. I did. I didn't put down the Japanese writing because I am not quite sure if I could have got that to look right with blocks. Um, but this was a bit awkward because I wasn't sure how to do this because it was a much smaller scale and I wanted to use 2 by 2, but when you're working with an odd number, you can't quite do that. So it looks a little bit awkward if you look at it like this. Um, but apart from that, like the shaping of the turrets themselves look pretty spot on. Uh, the bit I'm most proud about this build was this back section. It looks great, and I think it turned out exactly uh, how it looks when in comparison to what the actual ship looks like. And even like the underneath section, these curves came out a lot better. And I had a bit of practice with the last ship that these curves were a lot simpler. And we had to do more of this on a larger scale later on, but we'll see that as we move on. This was probably the most awkward bit, making this sort of concave uh, section that also curved upwards. It was a bit funky. I think that took a little bit of work, but we eventually got there. And using carpet because I didn't want to replace blocks, and this strategy only really works like this because you can't do it on the sides, which is a bit of a shame. We tried to do that, but uh, maps make a bit of a mess of it. But this is the Yukikaze. Uh, this ship turned out pretty well. I think the front's a little bit out of size with the rest just by a bit, but most I'm overall quite happy with how it turned out. Um, with these ships out of the way, it's time to move on to the Gamma ships, which are, if I follow my arrows correctly, just over here. Because usually when I'm at low render distance, I can't see. Um, and we had this over here, which I think was the first build that I built after I built this after the Yukikaze, if I remember correctly. Um, and this is quite small actually. I probably would have built it bigger if I was building it now, but in hindsight, it's actually probably surprisingly enough to scale because it may be a little bit smaller, but it rests on the top of one of those uh in 2202, I think, and it just sits on the deck, so that it sort of matches in a way. Um, but it's a little bit small to get good detailing in. This was extremely awkward to get a lot of the detailing in. I mean, a lot of stuff is straight lines. These actually what I was pretty happy with for what we had. But the most awkward bit, and the bit I ended up being most proud of on this, was the engine. Because there's only so much you can do with such a small amount of space, and I was able to sort of get all this small detailing in, like these bits that stick out, um, just bit by bit, even with the small space I had, and I was really happy with that. And but yeah, this was awkward because I put myself in a bit of a corner with the size that I built, and when it came to doing stuff like the superstructure, it was like, oh no, now what? How do I do this? Um, but we got there in the end. Um, but yeah, I think that's all we have for that one. Uh, now this is probably one of the builds I'd say I'm the most proud of. I would have said this was my most proud of build before I built the the Yamato itself. But this is the Palmyra class assault carrier. Looks pretty bland from the top in a sense. But like I was ecstatic with how this turned out when I built it. It just worked and looked right. Everything about this looks how like the best possible way it really could be done. I mean, you could do it infinitely better the bigger you get, but for this scale, I'm exceptionally happy with how it turned out. But the bottom is where it really comes together, and that's this section here is what I'm the most proud of because the this is a sort of laser cannon, and it had so much intricate looking detail in the picture I was doing, and I'm like, how the hell am I gonna do that? And then I just sort of went into this flow state when I was building it, and this came out, and it just looked so perfect. And it's probably not exactly perfect, but it somehow came out exactly how I'd envisioned transferring it into Minecraft, and I don't. I don't know how I did it, and I don't know if I'd be able to replicate something like that again. Um, exactly like as I envisioned it. I think the closest thing is the Yamato, and that came out incredibly. But there's still some things that sort of niggle at me that aren't exactly perfect. Um, but the whole underneath looks good. The only thing I could say about this, if I had my time again, was to make it very slightly rounder, but it is barely noticeable. Especially when you you look at it from like all the angles. It's not even like an issue really. The only thing is you don't really get the full beauty of it unless you got the night vision potion on, because it completely obscures everything. But then we move on to this was probably the build that frustrated me the most. The this was a build that I had to give up on for, well, not give up on, but like actively take a break from building for him for an extended period of time. I think I was about 20 or 30 parts ahead of my uploads with this, which probably was about a month. I probably had like a month or two backlog of videos of this, and I just for a month or two I couldn't build this because every time I started, uh, I would build for 20 minutes and stop because it just wasn't. I couldn't get in the right state of mind to build this ship. It was exceptionally frustrating at multiple times, and I just couldn't quite get it right in the ways I wanted to in some sections. I mean, if I could have my time again, I'd make very slight changes to the front because I think the bottom, it just bulges out a little bit more if I bring my crosshair out. Um, this curves down a little bit and comes up, so I'd have to like lower these sections and rejig the front. There was like a whole sort of deal that wasn't sort of a thing, a deal breaker with the whole build. It was like the tiniest thing that probably only I'd noticed, but it really was starting to get frustrating building up. This took quite a bit of time, but overall it's like it's not too bad. It's quite simple. It's quite a simple gradient. Um, but you can see some sections where I pretty much kept it simple because it was much easier to keep simple and just do lines and then gradient it a little and so on and so forth. But what I did to really get myself through this sort of build that was really daunting when I started it was, and if you saw the videos, but for those who didn't, I started building the front and then I just built the top, because the top was flat and easy to build. This whole section easy to build. All of this extremely easy, boring but easy, and then just sort of working my way to the back, building the basic structure of this without doing too much, because this was also a bit awkward in some places. Connecting these bits and curving it all correctly. Um, this building this is like, when it came to like this section, it was like, you know, getting long in the tooth, and it was like a bit for it's still getting a bit dull building the top because it was just this, but building this and getting this right how I envisioned it, in a sense, inspired me to keep going. And we got to the back, and then we worked on the back in a sense from the back to the front. I don't know if we started this before we did the tube sort of shapes at the front. That was a whole deal. But this is the best bit of this ship is the rear. It turned out incredibly, for this build. I think this is the best bit of the entire build. It turned out as good as I could have hoped for. Um, but that was what really another part that really like kept me going with this build is just building when it all comes together and you build something like this and you're like, now I gotta finish this. Um, and then building the underneath. The underneath wasn't too bad, quite flat. These sections here, uh, this is I think when it got to building these sections is when I stopped for quite a while because I just every time I tried to do something, it just didn't feel right. Um, and it was just awkward, just the way it was curving in and getting smaller and smaller. And it was curving in on multiple different angles on a diagonal, and it was incredibly awkward and time consuming to get right. And it was like once once it was done on one side, I was like, then I had to copy it and copy it close to exact. And then once we did all that work and we closed up everything and finished the hull, then the detailing had to start, and that was a stressful job in itself, just adding just lines everywhere and trying to make them look right. But in the end, I this being the most stressful build still turned out absolutely incredibly. And there's something that you might have noticed in the fly around on the last episode of this if you saw it. I actually forgot to finish this one piece sticking out here. I had that one done. I forgot to finish that. I did the whole fly around. At the end of fly around, I went, "Damn, I missed some bits." So that's a little funny thing that you might notice if you watch it. Um, but I think that concludes, for the most part, all the projects I've built so far. Uh, I'm extremely happy with all of them, and I was going to make another one of these and recolor it or at least copy and paste, but it frustrated me that I had to like stop looking at it for a week. And then I just had started. I think the Yamato was right after that. I really jumped into another intense build after it, and that took a bit of time too to get done, just simply because of how awkward it was, and that ended up going from a being ahead for a bit to I was building it on the day I was uploading it and getting it done piece by piece. But yeah, with that, I think we'll conclude. Uh, Thank you for watching. If you stayed to the end, thank you very much. Uh, if you're interested in seeing how I built these, I've got Let's Build series for each of them. Uh, there's a two-year gap between episode 20 and 21 of the Andromeda series. Um, don't mind that. There is a little bit of a there's a bit of music change too to that one. But yeah, if you want to check, there's the Let's Build Andromeda, there's the Let's Build the EDF Battleship, there's the Let's rebuild the rebuild the EDF Battleship into the 2202 Dreadnought. There's a Let's Build the Kirishima, Let's Build the Yukikaze, um, uh, Let's Build Dessler's ship. I forget what it's called. I think it's a Desur 3. There's the Palmyra Assault class carrier, the Galvades carrier, and the final one that I've done so far is the Yamato. If you like this content and want to see more, feel free to subscribe. If you like this video, feel free to hit the like. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.